Imagine waking up in a world where every sunrise could be your last, where the cold claws at your skin and shadows hide beasts that would rip you apart without hesitation. In this land of ice and fang, survival isn't luck. It's a war you fight every single day. And in that war, one kind of human didn't just fight, they dominated. Welcome to the age of the Neanderthals, titans of muscle and instinct, misunderstood by history, feared by nature, forgotten by time, but not by us. Because today, we at Prehistoric Medievals are going to drag their story back into the light. And if you're fascinated by ancient battles for survival, subscribe now, because this journey is just getting started. 50,000 years ago, Europe was a frozen monster. Wind-swept plains, jagged cliffs, endless snow. This was no paradise, it was a gauntlet. A place where woolly mammoths rumbled like freight trains, saber-toothed cats hunted like ghosts, and cave bears could crush you without breaking stride. Nature wasn't your friend. It didn't care about your intelligence or your dreams. It cared only about power. Raw, brutal, relentless power. And that's where the Neanderthals came in. They weren't the weak-jawed, grunting fools you've seen in cartoons. No, these were warriors built by nature's harshest trials. Broad, fierce, sharp, and for a time, they ruled. Neanderthals weren't alone, though. Homo sapiens, our own ancestors, were spreading too. But they were different, leaner, built to run, built to endure. The Neanderthals, on the other hand, were walking fortresses, short, stocky, with rib cages that could have been carved from tree trunks and arms that looked like they bench-pressed boulders for fun. Their bodies weren't a mistake. They were evolution's answer to a nightmare world. And if you're still with me, hit that subscribe button for more raw stories from the edge of human history. Prehistoric Medievals doesn't just tell you the facts, we drag you into the story. But muscle alone wasn't enough. These weren't mindless tanks. They were thinkers, tool makers, hunters with strategies that rivaled modern military units. Picture a group of Neanderthals crouched in silence as a mammoth herd passes. They don't panic, they don't rush, they wait, they calculate, and then strike. With spears sharpened by fire and minds sharpened by survival. These were the apex predators of the Ice Age. But their story, like every great legend, is one of rise and fall. And to understand the rise, we have to look at their bodies like blueprints. Their bones weren't just thick, they were dense, like concrete wrapped in sinew. At sites like La Ferracie in France, archaeologists found Neanderthal skeletons that tell a story of power etched in every joint. Shoulders built for explosive spear thrusts, arms forged by endless hours of scraping hides and dragging kills, and the right arms, massive, likely from the repeated violence of close combat hunting. Their skulls were long and low, with ridges that looked like natural helmets. This wasn't a cosmetic feature. That brow ridge acted like built-in armor. When a Neanderthal clashed with prey or rival tribes, it protected their brains from the blows. Their jaws were monsters, anchored by thick muscle, capable of ripping raw meat or crushing tough plants when cooking just wasn't an option. And their torsos, imagine a barrel with lungs. Their rib cages were wide and deep, housing lungs that could pull in enough oxygen to fuel a sprint, a hunt, a life lived on the edge. Compare that to us, our slimmer chests built for long-distance travel. We're runners. Neanderthals were chargers. When they moved, they hit like trucks. Their legs were short, yes, but powerful. Perfect for keeping warm and perfect for balance. Every step they took was stable, forceful, built for icy slopes, uneven terrain, and the kind of brute tasks most of us couldn't imagine. And their hands, don't even try to compare. Thick fingers, broad palms built for both detail and destruction. Fossils from Shanidar Cave in Iraq show us hands that could carve a flint blade and crush a bone without a pause. Try arm wrestling in Neanderthal, you'd be lucky to keep your shoulder attached. And if this mental image is gripping you like their fists, subscribe right now, because at Prehistoric Medievals, we aren't here to whisper history, we shout it. And here's where it gets wild. It wasn't just visible strength, it was genetic. Neanderthals shared 99.9% of our DNA, but the difference was everything. Genes like LRP5 made their bones thicker and harder. Others boosted muscle growth, oxygen usage, metabolism. They were natural-born powerlifters. If a Neanderthal walked into your gym today, he'd be repping 800 pounds without a protein shake. Punches? Studies estimate 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of force, enough to fracture ribs, cave in skulls. This wasn't athleticism, it was survival encoded into their blood.
But strength wasn't where the story ended, because Neanderthals weren't just beasts. They were hunters with terrifying efficiency. Hunting was a full-body war, and Neanderthals fought it as a tribe. Imagine facing a woolly rhinoceros, 15 feet long, armored in hide, and faster than you'd expect. Now, imagine facing it up close, with nothing but wooden spears and stone blades. Neanderthals didn't throw their weapons from afar. They charged. They attacked in packs. Some would distract, others would flank. And when the beast turned to gore one hunter, another would drive a spear through its ribs from the blind side. It was brutal and brilliant. Sites like Schoningen in Germany revealed wooden spears nearly 7 feet long, hardened in fire, perfectly balanced for thrusting. Not a single wasted design. At La Côte de Saint-Brelade in Jersey, bone piles suggest they used the land itself, herding mammoths off cliffs, then finishing them in the chaos. Strategy, terrain manipulation, teamwork. These weren't just hunters, they were tacticians. And their tools weren't sloppy either. Flint blades, obsidian scrapers, bone awls, all shaped with an engineer's precision. They didn't just kill, they crafted, they adapted. A single mammoth kill could feed a tribe for weeks. Its bones turned into tools, its hide into shelter, its sinew into thread. And if you're picturing all this in your head, imagine living it, every day, every breath. That's the intensity Neanderthals faced. And still, they thrived. But why did they fall? That's the twist. The most powerful humans to ever walk the earth were eventually outpaced, not by strength, but by something else, by change, by fragility. And in Part 2, we'll dive deep into how these titans faded into legend. But not yet, because before we watch them fall, we need to understand the full scale of what they were. Subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals right now, because Part 2 will hit harder than a Neanderthal punch. Neanderthals had the muscle, they had the tools, they had the intelligence to track a mammoth through blinding snow and take it down with nothing but spears and grit. So why? Why did they vanish? What shattered their reign at the top of nature's food chain? The truth is, their extinction wasn't one event. It was a slow, grinding unraveling driven by pressure they couldn't overpower. And then this second part of our journey, we're going to peel back the layers. If Part 1 showed you the legend, now we face the fall. But the fall, as always, carries its own lessons. So if you haven't yet, smash that subscribe button for more raw, unfiltered history, only on Prehistoric Medievals. It started with competition. Around 45,000 years ago, a new kind of human entered the Neanderthal world, Homo sapiens, us. But we didn't walk into Europe alone. We brought something Neanderthals didn't: connection. Sapiens didn't just live in small family units. They built vast social webs. Information flowed. Resources were shared. Ideas spread like wildfire. If one group of sapiens discovered a better way to hunt, that technique didn't die with them. It was passed, tribe to tribe, generation to generation. Think of Neanderthal tribes as isolated outposts. Think of Homo sapiens as an expanding network of living web of innovation and survival. That difference? It changed everything.
Neanderthals could go hungry and never know another group just across the ridge had food. But sapiens? If a tribe struggled, others helped. When the climate turned colder, sapiens adapted faster, shared new shelter designs, passed on knowledge of medicinal plants. They weren't stronger, but they were more connected. And in a world that was changing faster than ever, that was the true superpower. Then came innovation. Neanderthals had fire-hardened spears. Sapiens had bows, throwing spears, atlatls. Neanderthals had blades. Sapiens turned them into needles, fishhooks, harpoons. At sites like Blombos Cave in South Africa, scientists found carved ochre and jewelry from over 70,000 years ago. That's symbolic thinking. That's imagination. Sapiens painted on cave walls, sang songs, buried their dead with rituals. They didn't just survive, they created culture. And culture, believe it or not, was a survival weapon. Because culture strengthens bonds. It teaches through stories. It passes on warnings, wisdom, wonder. It tells you where the mammoths roam, where danger waits, what dreams are worth chasing. Neanderthals had some symbolic behavior, burials, maybe even art, but it was rare, patchy. They didn't develop it into a tool the way sapiens did. And while Neanderthal strength may have crushed bones, sapiens built legends that carried entire generations forward. And you're here right now watching Prehistoric Medievals because that storytelling spark still burns. So keep it alive, hit subscribe, and let's keep digging. But even that wasn't the whole story. The Earth itself turned against them. Climate chaos rolled across Ice Age Europe like a monster. Forests vanished, tundra spread, food got scarce. The big game Neanderthals relied on, mammoths, rhinos, elk, started disappearing. And here's the cruel part. Neanderthals were built like tanks, but they were tanks in a world that ran out of fuel. Their heavy muscles and high-calorie needs became a curse. Their bodies demanded more than the land could give. Homo sapiens, lighter and more versatile, could shift, hunt smaller animals, gather plants, travel farther. Like comparing a gas-guzzling engine to a hybrid car, the Neanderthal frame was powerful, but it broke down when the fuel ran out. That's the brutal truth of evolution. It doesn't care how strong you are. It cares how fast you change. Genetics didn't help either. Neanderthal populations were small, isolated, inbred, vulnerable. With little genetic diversity, they struggled to recover from disease, famine, or disaster. Even when sapiens arrived, some interbreeding occurred. Today, most non-African humans carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, but that wasn't enough to save them. Their line was a trickle. Ours became a flood.
And so they faded. Not all at once, not with a bang, but slowly. The last known Neanderthals may have held out in Gibraltar, clinging to the cliffs as the world moved on without them. Until, one day, there were no more footprints in the snow. Only bones, tools, ash from forgotten fires, and the silence that follows a legend's fall. But this isn't the end of their story, because echoes of Neanderthals are still around us, in our genes, in our myths, and in the modern world. Think about the Inuit people of the Arctic. They hunt with harpoons in sub-zero temperatures, use teamwork, know their land like the back of their frost-bitten hands. That's Neanderthal survival, reborn. Or look at strongman competitions. Men like Hafthor Bjornsson lifting over 1,000 pounds. The closest we've come to Neanderthal strength in modern form. But even he relies on training, science, community. The same things that gave Homo sapiens the edge. Or go to the high steppes of Mongolia, where nomadic herders still battle brutal winters, still rely on tight-knit groups to haul, to hunt, to survive. Neanderthal spirit never died. It adapted. It evolved. And that's the lesson. Because the Neanderthal tale isn't one of failure. It's a warning and a wisdom. You can be the strongest in the room, the smartest, the most fearless. But if you don't adapt, if you don't connect, you fall. Strength must walk beside flexibility. Power must be guided by insight. That's what carried Homo sapiens forward, and it's what keeps us here now. So what does this mean for you, in your own life, in your world? Are you the lone hunter, charging into the storm with nothing but grit? Or are you building your tribe, adapting your tools, strengthening your mind as well as your body? The Ice Age is over, but the trials haven't stopped. And just like the Neanderthals, you're facing a world that won't wait for you to catch up. So evolve, learn, connect. Because survival doesn't go to the strongest, it goes to the ones who change. Thanks for walking this path with us. If you found strength in this story, subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals for more epic tales from humanity's forgotten chapters. Hit that bell so you never miss the next saga. And tell us in the comments, do you think the Neanderthals were doomed from the start, or could history have gone differently? This was the rise and fall of the Neanderthals. And here at Prehistoric Medievals, we're just getting started.